The entire kingdom celebrated when the Alpha King chose his Luna. But nobody noticed the Omega standing alone in the shadows. Nobody knew she was the one his destiny had been searching for all along. The grand halls of Silver Moon Palace shone beneath thousands of golden lights, as nobles from every corner of the kingdom gathered for the most important ceremony of the year. Tonight was the night the Alpha King would announce the woman who would stand beside him as Luna. Families arrived wearing their finest clothes, hoping their daughters would become part of the royal legacy. Everyone believed they already knew how the evening would end. The strongest families would gain more influence. The most admired Omega would receive the greatest honor. And the Alpha King would choose the perfect Luna for his throne. But hidden among the crowd stood Emily Carter, a quiet Omega from a small family with no powerful connections. She did not come expecting a crown. She did not come hoping for attention. She simply came because every member of the kingdom had been invited to witness the ceremony. Emily had spent her entire life understanding what it felt like to be overlooked. Unlike the noble families, she had no impressive name to protect her. Unlike the powerful alphas, she had no authority to make others listen. But she had something many people had forgotten: a heart that refused to judge others by their position. Across the hall stood Alexander Hayes, the Alpha King of the Werewolf realm. He was respected by everyone around him. His presence carried the weight of leadership, and every decision he made could change the future of the kingdom. For years, people had searched for the perfect Luna to stand beside him. Tonight, everyone waited for his choice. When Alexander finally stepped forward, the entire room became silent. Emily watched from a distance, never imagining that her life would soon change forever. The Alpha King looked across the hall and announced his decision. He chose a Luna from one of the most powerful families in the kingdom. Applause filled the room. Smiles appeared across the faces of the nobles. The future seemed clear. Everyone celebrated the beginning of a new royal alliance. Everyone except the Omega standing quietly among the crowd. Emily lowered her eyes and accepted the moment without anger. She had never believed that someone owed her a place beside the throne. She only believed that every person deserved respect. Yet something strange happened as the ceremony continued. Alexander felt an unfamiliar emptiness that he could not explain. The choice that should have brought certainty somehow left him feeling like something important was missing. He looked across the room, but he did not know why his attention was drawn toward the quiet Omega who stood away from everyone else. For only a moment their eyes met. Emily quickly looked away, unaware that this brief moment would become the beginning of a destiny neither of them understood. That night, the kingdom celebrated the Alpha King's choice. They believed the future had already been written. They believed they knew who belonged beside the throne. But destiny had a different story waiting. Because the person everyone ignored was the one person the Alpha King's soul would never forget. The days after the Luna ceremony felt different throughout Silver Moon Kingdom. The palace was filled with celebration, but beneath the joyful conversations, there were questions that nobody could answer. The Alpha King had chosen his Luna, yet something about the decision continued to trouble him. Alexander Hayes had spent his entire life preparing for responsibility. Every choice he made was meant to protect the kingdom and strengthen its future. He believed choosing a Luna from a powerful family was the right decision. It was logical. It was expected. But for reasons he could not understand, his heart remained unsettled. Meanwhile, Emily Carter returned to her quiet life away from the attention of the royal court. She did not blame the Alpha King. She did not resent the woman he chose. Emily knew that love and destiny could not be forced. She had learned long ago that holding on to disappointment only created more pain. Instead, she focused on helping her small community, just as she always had. The people around her knew Emily as someone who listened, cared, and offered kindness even when she received little recognition in return. Far away in the palace, Alexander found himself remembering the Omega he had barely spoken to during the ceremony. He remembered the calm expression on her face when everyone else was celebrating. He remembered that she had not looked angry or disappointed. She had simply accepted the moment with quiet dignity. That memory stayed with him longer than he expected. One afternoon, Alexander attended a meeting with his advisors when an unusual topic was brought forward. Several elders mentioned an old legend connected to the Alpha bloodline. According to ancient traditions, The true bond of an alpha king could not be created through politics or expectations. It could only be recognized through destiny. Alexander listened carefully but dismissed the thought. He had already chosen his Luna. He believed his decision was final. Yet the more he tried to ignore the feeling inside him, the stronger it became. There was a strange connection he could not explain, as if a missing piece of his life was waiting somewhere beyond the palace walls. Days later, Alexander traveled beyond the capital to visit nearby villages. During his journey, he unexpectedly crossed paths with Emily. She was helping local families prepare supplies before the changing season. She looked surprised to see him, but she immediately showed the same respect she showed everyone else. She did not treat him differently because he was the Alpha King. She simply greeted him as another person. Alexander noticed something he had not seen in the palace. Emily carried a warmth that did not come from wealth or influence. It came from who she was. "You seem different from everyone I have met at the palace," Alexander said quietly. Emily smiled. "Maybe because I have never tried to be someone else." Her answer stayed in his mind. She was not trying to impress him. She was not seeking a place beside him. She was simply being herself. For the first time, Alexander wondered if he had been searching for the wrong things. That evening, as the moon rose over the kingdom, something deep inside him began to awaken. It was not a thought. It was not a decision. It was something older than reason, something connected to the very nature of an alpha. And although he did not understand it yet, his instincts were beginning to recognize the person his heart had overlooked. The quiet encounter between Alexander Hayes and Emily Carter stayed in the Alpha King's thoughts long after he returned to the palace. He had met countless people throughout his reign, each one wanting something from him because of his title. Some wanted influence. Some wanted recognition. Some wanted to stand close to power. But Emily had been different. She had looked at him without fear or expectation. She had spoken to him as if he were simply a person, not a king surrounded by endless responsibilities. For the first time in years, Alexander wondered if he had forgotten what genuine connection felt like. Meanwhile, Emily continued living her simple life, unaware of the thoughts she had left behind in the Alpha King's mind. She never imagined that a brief conversation could change anything. To her, Alexander was still the ruler of the kingdom, and she was still the Omega who had never belonged among the powerful families. She believed their paths had crossed only for a moment before destiny moved them apart again. But fate had already started weaving a different story. As the weeks passed, Alexander found more reasons to visit the villages outside the capital. Officially, he came to understand the needs of his people. But deep inside, he knew there was another reason. He wanted to see Emily again. Each time they met, he discovered something new about her. She did not speak to impress others. She did not seek attention. She simply cared about the people around her. Her kindness was not a performance. It was part of who she was. One afternoon, Alexander watched Emily help an elderly villager organize supplies for the coming winter. She smiled warmly, offering encouragement and patience. It was a small moment, but to Alexander, it revealed something important. The strongest people were not always the ones who demanded to be seen. Sometimes the strongest hearts were the ones quietly supporting everyone else. That evening, Alexander returned to the palace and found himself standing before an ancient symbol of the Alpha bloodline. For generations, stories have been passed down about a connection that existed beyond titles and expectations. A bond that could not be chosen by politics or arranged by tradition. A bond recognized by something deeper. He had always believed those stories were simply old legends. Yet recently, something inside him felt impossible to ignore. His wolf, the instinctive part of his alpha nature, seemed restless whenever he thought about Emily. It was not a feeling of control or possession. It was a feeling of recognition, as if something forgotten was slowly awakening. Alexander struggled with the thought because it challenged everything he believed. He had already chosen his Luna. He had made a promise before the entire kingdom. Admitting uncertainty meant accepting that he might have misunderstood his own destiny. The next day, Emily unexpectedly arrived at the palace to deliver supplies from her village. She never expected to meet the Alpha King personally. When Alexander saw her enter the grand hall, the noise around him seemed to fade. For a brief moment, The powerful ruler of Silver Moon Kingdom was not thinking about politics, alliances, or expectations. He was simply noticing the Omega who had treated him with kindness before knowing his true worth. Their eyes met and something changed. Alexander finally understood that the feeling he had been trying to explain was not confusion. It was recognition. He did not know the full truth yet, but a hidden bond was beginning to reveal itself. And for the first time, the Alpha King questioned whether the choice he made in front of the entire kingdom had truly been the right one. The moment Alexander Hayes realized something inside him had changed became impossible to ignore. For years, the Alpha King had trusted his judgment above everything else. Every decision had been carefully planned, every responsibility carried with confidence. But now, standing in the grand hall of Silver Moon Palace, he felt the weight of a question he could no longer avoid. Had he chosen his future, or had he simply followed what everyone expected of him? Emily Carter returned to her village after delivering the supplies, unaware of the storm of emotions taking place within the palace walls. She did not know that the Alpha King had started questioning the decision that had once seemed certain. She did not know that the brief moments they shared had awakened something buried beneath years of duty and tradition. To Emily, he was still the ruler of the kingdom, and she was still the Omega who belonged far away from the world of royalty. But destiny had already begun bringing their paths closer together. In the days that followed, Alexander found himself searching for answers. He studied ancient records connected to the Alpha bloodline, and discovered stories that had been forgotten by many. The legend spoke of a rare bond that could not be created by promises, political arrangements, or powerful families. It was a connection recognized by instinct, something that appeared when two souls were truly meant to find each other. Alexander had always respected the traditions of his ancestors, but he had never expected those stories to become part of his own life. Meanwhile, rumors began spreading throughout the kingdom. Some nobles questioned why the Alpha King seemed distracted after choosing his Luna. Others believed he was simply carrying the pressure of leadership. Nobody suspected that the quiet Omega from a small village had become the center of his thoughts. Emily continued helping her community, never allowing the opinions of others to define her. She had spent years being underestimated, and she learned that chasing acceptance from people who refused to see her value was exhausting. Instead, she focused on the things she could control: her kindness, her choices, and the way she treated others. That strength was exactly what made Alexander notice her even more. During another visit to the villages, Alexander found Emily near the edge of the town, organizing a small gathering for families who needed support before the colder months arrived. When she saw him, she offered a polite greeting but did not change who she was. She did not become nervous because he was the Alpha King. She did not try to impress him. She simply welcomed him with the same honesty she showed everyone else. "You always seem to care about people who cannot offer you anything in return," Alexander said. Emily looked at him and smiled softly. Maybe because kindness should never depend on what someone can give back. Her words stayed with him. In that moment, Alexander understood why his instincts continued pulling him toward her. It was not only about destiny, it was about the person she was. She carried a warmth that could not be created by status or power. As the sun disappeared behind the mountains, Alexander felt his wolf grow quiet for the first time in weeks. The feeling was no longer confusion. It was certainty beginning to form. The Alpha King finally realized that the bond he had been searching for was not hidden, because it was impossible to find. It was hidden because he had been looking in the wrong direction. The truth that Alexander Hayes had been avoiding was finally becoming impossible to ignore. The Alpha King had spent his entire life believing that duty meant following the path created for him. Every tradition, every expectation, and every responsibility had shaped his decisions. But now, standing between the expectations of the kingdom and the quiet presence of Emily Carter, he began to question whether he had confused responsibility with destiny. Emily continued living her life without knowing how deeply she had affected the ruler of Silver Moon Kingdom. She did not seek recognition from the palace. She did not hope for a royal position. She simply continued being the person she had always been. She helped her neighbors, listened to those who felt forgotten, and offered kindness without expecting anything in return. That was what made her different from everyone Alexander had known before. Her value was not created by a title. It existed because of who she was. Inside the palace, Alexander started searching through the oldest records of the Alpha bloodline. The writings described a bond that appeared only once in a generation, a connection that could not be chosen through alliances or influenced by powerful families. It was a bond that recognized the truth hidden beneath appearances. As he read those ancient words, Alexander remembered the night of the Luna ceremony. He remembered the applause when he announced his choice. He remembered everyone celebrating the future they believed was perfect. But he also remembered Emily standing quietly among the crowd. She had not tried to compete. She had not tried to prove herself. She had simply accepted what happened with a grace that stayed in his mind. For the first time, Alexander realized that the person who expected nothing from him was the person who had shown him the most honesty. However, accepting this truth was not easy. He had already chosen a Luna before the entire kingdom. His decision carried consequences. As a king, he could not act only on emotion. He had to consider the feelings of others and the responsibility attached to his position. But ignoring what he felt also meant ignoring something that seemed deeply connected to his own nature. Meanwhile, Emily noticed that people from the palace had started treating her differently. Some villagers whispered that the Alpha King had taken interest in her. Others wondered why someone like Alexander would spend time with an Omega from a simple background. Emily did not allow those voices to change her. She knew that attention could disappear as quickly as it arrived. The only thing she trusted was the person she had always been. One evening, Alexander visited Emily once again. This time, he did not arrive as a distant ruler surrounded by guards and ceremony. He came simply to speak with her. They walked through the peaceful village paths beneath the evening sky. "Do you ever wish you were someone different?" Alexander asked. Emily thought for a moment before answering. "No. I used to think being different made me less valuable. But I learned that the things people overlook can become the things that matter most." Her words reached deeper than she realized. Alexander looked at her and understood something important. The kingdom had spent years searching for the perfect Luna based on status and appearance. But destiny had never been searching for perfection. It had been searching for authenticity. In that moment, the Alpha King knew that the greatest mistake of his life was not choosing the wrong future. It was failing to recognize the right person when she was standing in front of him. The days that followed became a quiet battle within Alexander Hayes. The Alpha King stood at the center of the kingdom, carrying the responsibility of countless lives. Yet the one decision he had made for his own future was the one that troubled him the most. He had chosen a Luna based on tradition, expectations, and the advice of those around him. But every time he thought of Emily Carter, he remembered something that no title or alliance could provide. He remembered honesty. He remembered peace. He remembered a connection that felt natural rather than forced. Emily, however, remained unaware of the struggle taking place in the palace. She continued her simple routine, believing that her brief encounters with the Alpha King were nothing more than unexpected moments. She did not dream of becoming part of the royal world. She had already learned that chasing a place where she was not welcomed would only take away the peace she had built for herself. Her strength came from accepting who she was, even when others failed to see her worth. One morning, Alexander returned to the village and found Emily helping families prepare for the colder season. The scene was ordinary, yet it revealed something that the palace walls had hidden from him. Emily did not need a crown to inspire respect. She did not need power to make people listen. The people around her trusted her because she cared about them. Alexander watched quietly and realized that leadership was not only about making important decisions from a throne. It was also about understanding the hearts of the people standing before you. Later that evening, Alexander met with the royal advisors. They noticed the change in him and questioned whether he was uncertain about his choice of Luna. The Alpha King remained silent for a moment because he knew the truth was complicated. He did not want to hurt anyone, but he also could not continue pretending that everything felt right. A kingdom cannot be built on expectations alone, one of the oldest advisors finally told him. A leader must have the courage to recognize the truth, even when it is difficult. Those words stayed with Alexander. For the first time, he understood that being an Alpha King was not about always appearing certain. It was about having the honesty to admit when something needed to change. Meanwhile, Emily faced her own doubts. As rumors about the Alpha King's interest reached her village, some people began treating her differently. Some admired her. Others questioned why someone like her had captured the attention of the most powerful alpha in the realm. Emily did not let those opinions define her. She had spent too many years being judged by people who never took the time to understand her. She knew her worth was not decided by whether the kingdom accepted her. One evening, Alexander found Emily walking through the village gardens. The peaceful surroundings reminded him why he kept returning. "You are not afraid of what people think," he said. Emily looked at him and smiled gently. "I used to be. But then I realized that if I changed myself to satisfy everyone else, I would lose the person I was meant to become." Alexander felt those words deeply. The Omega before him was not powerful because of a title. She was powerful because she remained kind in a world that often rewarded pride. As the moon rose above Silver Moon Kingdom, Alexander finally accepted what his instincts had been trying to tell him. The bond he felt was not a passing feeling. It was a truth he could no longer ignore. But before he could reveal that truth, he knew he had to face the consequences of his earlier choice. The Alpha King had found the person destiny had placed before him. Now, he had to prove that he was worthy of the person he had almost overlooked. The moment Alexander Hayes accepted the truth within himself, he knew that understanding his destiny was only the beginning. The harder journey would be proving that he deserved the trust of the person he had almost failed to recognize. The Alpha King had spent years believing that leadership meant making the perfect decision every time. Now he understood that true leadership also required humility, honesty, and the courage to correct a mistake. Across Silver Moon Kingdom, whispers continued to spread. Many wondered why the Alpha King, who had already announced his Luna, seemed distant and uncertain. The nobles who once celebrated his decision began noticing the change in his expression and the questions he carried. But Alexander refused to make another choice based on appearances or expectations. This time he needed to follow the truth. Emily Carter remained the same person she had always been. She did not change because the Alpha King noticed her. She did not suddenly seek attention because people began speaking her name. She continued helping her village, caring for others, and living with the same quiet strength that had first caught Alexander's attention. That was what made the realization even clearer. Emily was not valuable because the Alpha King saw her worth. She had always been valuable. He was simply finally seeing what had been there all along. One afternoon, Alexander visited the village again. This time, he did not come with the confidence of a ruler who believed he already knew the answers. He came as someone searching for forgiveness and understanding. Emily noticed the difference immediately. The Alpha King who once seemed distant now carried a sense of honesty she had not seen before. "I have been thinking about something you said," Alexander told her. "You said that changing yourself for others can make you lose who you are." Emily looked at him quietly. "I believe everyone deserves the chance to be seen for who they truly are." Her words reminded him why his connection with her felt different. Emily did not admire his crown. She did not seek the protection of his position. She respected the person beneath it. For someone who had spent years surrounded by people who valued his title, that simple acceptance meant more than he could explain. Meanwhile, the royal advisors began preparing for difficult conversations within the palace. They knew that any change involving the Alpha King's Luna would affect the entire kingdom. Alexander understood this responsibility. He knew he could not simply follow emotion without considering the consequences. But he also knew that ignoring the truth would be an even greater failure. That evening, Alexander stood beneath the moonlight outside the palace and remembered the first moment he noticed Emily. She had been surrounded by people who overlooked her, yet she carried herself with more dignity than anyone in the room. She had no crown, no influence, and no reason to believe the Alpha King would ever notice her. Still, she showed kindness. She showed patience. She showed the strength that many powerful people lacked. The next day, Alexander made a decision. He would no longer allow tradition to hide the truth. He would speak honestly, accept responsibility, and give Emily the respect she deserved. The kingdom had once believed the story was already written when the Alpha King chose his Luna. But now a new chapter was beginning. And this time, it would be written with truth instead of expectation. The morning sun rose over Silver Moon Kingdom as Alexander Hayes prepared to face the moment he had been avoiding for weeks. The Alpha King had always believed that difficult choices were part of his duty, but this choice was different. It was not about territory, alliances, or the future of the throne. It was about being honest with the entire kingdom and accepting the truth he had finally understood. For the first time in his reign, Alexander knew that a true leader was not someone who never made mistakes. A true leader was someone brave enough to admit them and choose what was right. News of the Alpha King's decision spread throughout the palace. Some nobles were surprised. Others questioned why he would reconsider a choice that had already been announced. But Alexander remained calm. He knew that many people would judge him based on appearances, just as they had judged Emily Carter. The difference was that he could no longer allow those opinions to decide his future. Emily stood quietly as Alexander approached her in the village. She noticed the seriousness in his expression and understood that something important was about to happen. Yet even then, she did not expect anything from him. She had never wanted a crown. She had never wanted to replace anyone. She only wanted the truth. "Emily," Alexander said softly, "I spent a long time believing I knew what my future should look like. I followed what everyone expected of me, but I failed to see what was right in front of me." Emily listened without interrupting. The Alpha King continued, "You saw me as a person before you ever saw me as a king. You offered kindness when you had no reason to, and I realized that was something I could not ignore." His words carried a sincerity she had rarely heard from someone with so much power. Emily looked at him and said, "The truth is not always easy to accept, but accepting it is how people grow." Those simple words reminded Alexander why she was different. She did not seek revenge for the moments when she had been overlooked. She did not hold on to anger. She believed people could become better when they were willing to learn. When Alexander returned to the palace, he gathered the kingdom's leaders. He spoke honestly about the choice he had made and the truth he had discovered. He did not blame others for guiding him toward a path based on tradition. He accepted that the final decision had always been his. The people listened carefully. Many had once overlooked Emily because they believed a person's value came from their family name or position. But now they began to understand the mistake they had made. The Omega they had ignored had shown more wisdom and compassion than many who carried powerful titles. Over time, the kingdom began to change. The walls between different groups slowly became weaker. People started recognizing character before status. They began to understand that leadership was not about standing above others but standing with them. Alexander and Emily's connection became a symbol of a new beginning. Their story was not about a king finding someone worthy of his crown. It was about a king learning that the right person was never defined by popularity, wealth, or influence. The right person was the one who revealed the best version of who he could become. And as the kingdom looked toward the future, everyone finally understood what Emily had known from the beginning. True worth was never hidden by a lack of recognition. It was simply waiting for someone with the courage to see it. The story of Alexander Hayes and Emily Carter became a turning point in Silver Moon Kingdom, not because of a throne or a title, but because it changed the way people understood destiny. For generations, many believed that power determined a person's value. They believed a strong family name, a respected position, and a place among the elite were the things that created importance. But Emily had proven something different. She showed that kindness, courage, and honesty could leave a greater mark than any title ever could. Months after the kingdom learned the truth, life within Silver Moon Kingdom began to change. Emily did not become respected because she stood beside the Alpha King. She was respected because people finally saw the person she had always been. The same Omega who had once walked quietly through the crowd without recognition was now someone many looked to for guidance and hope. She never forgot where she came from. She continued visiting villages, listening to families, and helping those who felt unseen. Alexander admired this part of her more than anything. He had spent years surrounded by people who wanted the attention of the crown, but Emily had been the one person who cared about the person beneath it. She reminded him that leadership was not measured by how many people followed a ruler. It was measured by how many people felt valued under that ruler's care. One evening, Alexander and Emily walked through the palace gardens where their journey had begun. The same paths that once separated the world of royalty from the life of an ordinary Omega now represented the connection between two people who had changed each other. "Do you remember the first night we met?" Alexander asked. Emily smiled softly. "I remember everyone looking at you. Nobody was looking at me." Alexander looked at her with understanding. "And yet you were the one person who truly saw me." Those words carried the meaning of their entire journey. Emily had not recognized him because of his crown. She had recognized him because of his character. She had seen the kindness behind the power and the person behind the title. That was why their bond became stronger than any expectation created by the kingdom. As years passed, their story was shared with future generations. Young Omegas learned that being overlooked did not mean they lacked value. Young leaders learned that strength without compassion was incomplete. The people learned that destiny was not always revealed through grand moments. Sometimes it appeared quietly through a simple conversation, a small act of kindness, or a person who believed in someone before the world understood their worth. Alexander often thought about how different everything could have been if he had never looked beyond appearances. If he had continued following expectations without questioning them, he might have missed the person who brought true meaning into his life. Emily had not entered his world to change his crown. She entered his world to change his heart. Together they created a future built not on perfection, but on understanding. The Alpha King learned that the strongest leaders were those willing to listen. The Omega learned that her worth had never depended on whether others recognized it. Their journey became a reminder throughout the kingdom that destiny does not always arrive in the way people expect. Sometimes the greatest treasures are hidden in the places everyone else ignores. And sometimes the person standing quietly in the shadows is the one who carries the light everyone has been searching for.